2-hour video. Chat, you guys want to watch a 2-hour video with me? Ooh. YouTube?
This video is sponsored by AnyDesk.
I love Styropyro, bro. Thank you for the head pats. I love head pats. I love Styropyro. Chat, if you guys want to say hello to YouTube, now is your chance. I'm going to crank the volume on this bitch and tweak it over on OBS. And I'm going to take a sip of my water before we start. We're skipping our usual intro like we have been. If you're new here, if this is your first time catching a stream, or if you haven't been to stream in a while, I do farm us for content. We will be watching this shit live, and I will be uploading it as a YouTube video later. Just so you guys know, just for full transparency. Boo YouTube! Don't boo YouTube. We want the YouTubers. We want the YouTube community to come and say hello. Boo YouTube is so funny. Hello, guy on stream. Welcome in. Okay, let me fix myself, and we gotta jump in. We gotta jump in.
Hey guys, it's Drake Anthony here, and today I am bringing you some of the most extreme science experiments ever done on YouTube. Behind me, I have 400 car batteries wired together. With these batteries, I can pull electrical currents far beyond the typical lightning strike, and for much longer durations too.
I want to know how this man acquired 400 car batteries legally. I want to know how he pulled that off.
I can guarantee you that this video will be unlike anything you've ever seen in your life.
Why is my closed captioning
You may have watched the video I did with just 100 car batteries. I did manage to—
Hold on, we're gonna turn off closed captioning because I can't deal with that. I don't even know why it's on. Car batteries? What are they not doing in the ocean where they should be?
pull some
Crazy.
big currents there. But honestly, I did not utilize the full potential of those batteries. That being said, the data I obtained from those experiments has prepared me to get the most out of my new ones. So in short, even though I have 4 times as many batteries as last time, I'm actually expecting this bank to be 10 times stronger.
Now the other thing about the first video is that it made the YouTube overlords a bit uneasy. Now don't bring out the pitchforks, that's all since been resolved, but in the interest of avoiding issues with this video, I feel like I should spend a bit more time covering the scope and safety of this video. So let me be clear that this is not a stunt. The purpose of this video is to explore the physics of extreme currents. I'm talking scales like you'd find in a national lab, but since this is all in my backyard, I get to have a bit more fun with it. And to be honest,
I can't believe YouTube is making him put. I mean, I guess it makes sense, but I can't believe YouTube's making him put an obligatory "do not try this at home" on this.
much of this is just going to be me sticking random stuff in between the contacts to see what happens. And yes, I know this is a bit of a chaotic
Also, this looks like a crazy setup. That is an insane setup. Look at how many wires there are.
approach. But you know, this is really how a lot of scientific discovery happens.
Dog shit content.
I mean,
Please
you know, the
subscribe.
scientific method is great and all, but oftentimes, innovation is a product of just throwing things at the wall to see what sticks. So, why car batteries then? Well, as it turns out, car batteries are actually a great way of getting into electrical territory, where footage doesn't exist.
When it comes to making huge currents, most people think of using capacitors. But interestingly, car batteries don't fall
Is he pulling those car batteries out of this lake? Is that what's happening here?
that far behind in terms of max currents. The benefit with car batteries is that they can dump those currents for far longer than
Now this shit's reversed. That's such a funny fucking edit.
brief pulse.
That means that with a bank of, say, 400 car batteries, not only can I produce the most currents ever shown on YouTube, but I can do it for many thousands of times longer than the next contender. And let me tell you, there are so many interesting and important aspects of physics that show up at this scale. And I truly believe that all of this is going to offer an unprecedented look into the nature of extreme currents. So much so that I really think it's going to change the way that you look at electricity. So yeah, that is the purpose of this video. Now for a brief word on safety. I mean, it feels a bit silly for me.
Talking about safety while laying directly atop these batteries does not seem well in my head. I don't know, bro. I don't know.
To say don't try this at home considering, you know, the sheer magnitude of this project. I mean, even a single car battery can mess you up if you screw up hard enough. So yeah, you definitely shouldn't wire together 28,000 pounds of lead acid batteries in your yard, at least if you're not familiar with this sort of thing. But seriously, I think it's my safety that concerns people the most. And yeah, what I do on my channel can come off as pretty ridiculous.
Did he build himself a like little safety hut here? Is this new? Did he build this just for this video? That's kind of funny if he did.
And sketchy at times. But I will say this. I've been posting my mad science creations to YouTube since 2006. And let me tell you, it takes more than luck to do this kind of thing for 20 years without getting hurt. And that is because I am not a risk taker. And I realize that this must come off as the most ironic thing that I've ever said. But I never approach anything potentially dangerous without, fully understanding and mitigating the risks at hand. And no, I'm not in some fancy lab constrained by OSHA. I'm just a guy in my backyard with 400 car batteries. But I've dedicated my whole life to mastering extreme science, and I've slowly and carefully worked my way to the level that I'm dealing with today. So be assured, I know what I'm working with here.
So now that that's out of the way, I want to briefly cover the issues I had with the 100 battery bank before showing the changes I made with this new one. I started by wiring them all in parallel, but due to contact resistance of the connections, I was limited to only 15,000 amps this way. I then rewired the bank for parallel strings of 5 in series, and the higher voltage allowed me to achieve a peak current of about 48,000 amps. In hindsight, I could have probably gotten more current from parallel strings of just 3 or 4 in series, but with this new bank of 400, I calculated that 5 in series, giving 65 volts, is what will give me the most current. So this is the number I settled on. Assembling the new bank took about 2 months, and manually placing all 14 tons of batteries was the easy part. Most of my time was
14 tons of battery is crazy.
spent digging in the plastic platforms, cutting and crimping 500 cables, and cleaning all 2,000 contact points immediately before joining them. And this is where the real challenge begins. How do you switch 400 car batteries? I've already mentioned that the kinds of currents I plan on dealing with are in a territory where footage doesn't exist, over 100,000 amps sustained. This also means that the kind of switch I need is in an uncharted territory as well. I need something that can slam the full power of the batteries to the loads as fast as possible, while also having the ability to disconnect power if necessary. Well, this kind of thing doesn't exist for less than the cost of the batteries, which means I have to come up with something myself. For the 100 battery video, I used a modified log splitter as the switch, and this worked pretty much flawlessly. Since it miraculously still works after sitting in my yard for 2 years, I figured I should just beep
How the fuck did it survive sitting in his yard for 2 years? Usually shit like that would rust out and die.
this thing up with a bunch more copper and steel.
Now, since I need so much copper for the switch, I stopped by an unattended construction site and picked up a bunch of copper. So hopefully this will be enough to at least, get the switch wired. Then of course I might have to make a few more trips to wire the batteries. Now, as far as I know, this switch is going to be the biggest switch ever made for a YouTube video, at least by current. And let me tell you, when you're dealing with that kind of current, you run into some really weird issues.
I'm expecting the switch to vaporize a lot of copper in operation, so that's why I'll be using the biggest blocks as the switch contacts.
Now, I've saved machining them for last because, honestly, it's not that often that I get to play with pieces of copper this big. And actually, both of these blocks combined actually weigh more than I do, so yeah, there's a lot of copper here.
God damn. How much did that fucking copper weigh?
Ugh, I just want to eat them.
I also kind of want to take a bite out of them, but I don't know why.
So what's something interesting that you can do with 2 giant pieces of copper? Well, let's try tossing a magnet down there. No, I'm not slowing down this footage. It's really just, moving through there at a snail's pace. Pretty weird, right? There it goes. I don't even need to drop it between the plates either. Like, just bringing this magnet close without even touching it, it's almost enough to knock over this 65-pound plate. If I go ahead and force it all the way to the plate, it doesn't want to just fall off. It's really slow down there. It's like it's moving through syrup or something. Yeah, it's a really
That's like fascinating. Like how does that work like that? That's really cool.
effect. Holy heck. Forgot that table's magnetic.
So
How's the table magnetized? The fuck?
what causes these effects? Even though copper is not ferromagnetic, it is conductive, so it can still exert magnetic forces. Moving a magnet nearby induces currents in the copper, and it's these currents that pull on the magnet to slow it down.
Oh, was it a metal desk? If for some reason my brain told me it was wooden.
More conductive, so these effects are even more pronounced in silver bars. There's a reason I am showing you these demos. Generally speaking, this intrinsic connection between electricity and magnetism has profound implications about how the universe works. More specifically, it foreshadows what's to come with the batteries. The currents I'm expecting will produce incredibly strong magnetic forces. This will make for experiments that look nothing short of witchcraft. That is, assuming I can even tame them in the first place. When I started tearing down the switch to make my upgrades, I noticed that steel shavings were sticking to it like a magnet, so I decided to investigate. So I got this compass here, and if I put it next to this steel stock, it's a little affected, but it's not like, super strongly. But if I come over here, and I get just in the vicinity of this old switch here, you can see that the steel on there was very heavily magnetized.
That's crazy. It's throwing off his fucking magnet like that. That's crazy.
By being close to such extreme currents. It's really nifty. This led me to a less nifty realization. The original contacts mysteriously wore on one side only. I assumed it was because of misalignment, although weird.
Ew, that rusted out or burned out? I don't know what that did, but that looks gross.
The contacts look straight when fired with no load. I didn't think too much about it when it happened, because the switch still performed well. I realized too late that this was a magnetic issue. In the previous video, I showed you that currents going in the same direction attract each other, while opposite currents repel. What happened with the switch is that the opposing currents were magnetically repelling each other. The one side burned through was due to asymmetry in the cable arrangement. The daunting thing is that these forces scale with the square of current. That means that if I triple the current compared to last time, the magnetic forces will be 9 times stronger. This could cause some real issues. I still went ahead with building the new switch, and did my best to keep opposing currents as short and as far from each other as possible. I knew the magnetics could still be a problem, but since the closing spring is so strong, I figured it might simply just work as is. And if not, well, I can cross that bridge when I get to it. The finished setup looks straight out of sci-fi. Over 1,000 pounds of copper.
Hold on, chat. My little frog brain just caught up to something. Hold on, backtrack. Just a little.
The magnetic forces will be 9 times stronger. This could cause some real issues. I still went ahead with building the new switch, and did my best to keep opposing currents as short and as far from each other as possible.
Okay, you see this pan over to this,
Magnetics could still be up.
to this? I don't know why my brain told me that looked like chocolate curls, like chocolate curled shavings, and I really wanted to take a bite out of it, even though I know that's exactly not what it is. It's not what it is even for a fucking second, but I really want to bite it.
Problem, but since the closing spring is so strong, I figured it might simply just work as is. And if not, well, I can cross that bridge when I get to it. The finished setup looks straight out of sci-fi. Over 1,000 pounds of copper interconnect 28,000 pounds of lead. The work blocks are fed with 2 opposing loops of cable, which is in contrast to the single loop I used last time. This will cancel out the lateral magnetic forces that I had so much trouble fighting in the first video. I decided to start small with the initial experiments, mostly to rule out major issues before the currents become terrifying. For the first trial, I zapped a 3/8-inch galvanized steel rod.
Alright, here we go.
The effect was pretty much the same as when I zapped one with 100 car batteries. Oh yeah, so you can see it left a nice little splatter there. Even blew off one of the threads, which is really strange.
How the fuck did it do that? I don't think I've ever seen a bolt do that.
Trials with these small rods to dial in my camera settings. Although these don't look very impressive at normal speed, the slow-mo camera I have set up tells a very different story. The fact that this rod is galvanized is a critical detail here, since the boiling point of zinc is lower than the melting point of iron. This means that the zinc plating boils off first, which reacts with the air to form this striking green plasma.
Ooh.
When the iron finally melts, it gets magnetically ejected upwards, which is not something I expected to happen. For the next trial, I zapped a small aluminum bar.
Ugh.
Alright, pulled about 46,000 amps with that one. Nothing to write home about.
46,000 amps is crazy, I think. It should be difficult, how difficult, dangerous electricity can be. Yeah, yeah, no shit.
But, like a pretty
Like, I don't know. This dude's honest to God brave as fuck for even fucking with any of this. I don't think I could, and I don't think I would, like, actively be chill with anybody I know in real life doing this.
strong lightning strike.
The slow-mo turned out to be way overexposed, which is funny because it's usually a lack of light that's the challenge when filming at high speed. I ended up doing a few more trials in an attempt to get a better shot of the action.
Look at that. It got pushed up and then re-solidified in that hilarious configuration there. That was definitely a magnetic force that pushed it upwards like that.
Dude, it just straight up melted to whatever the fuck this is, or it melted together. Looks like he's got it clamped down. But it, like, you could see, like, the fucking melt pattern here.
It was difficult to get the exposure right with aluminum, since it burned so incredibly bright, but at least I was able to make out some of the finer details of the plasma fireballs in this one. I zapped a similarly sized titanium bar for the next trial. Kinda lame. I did find the slow-mo in this one to be pretty funny, since a random washer got sucked in magnetically, and a piece of titanium was spun violently as it was launched out. I stuck a
Yeah,
small
did you see that shit do a fucking sick 360 no-scope fucking kickflip? Like, that shit went.
tungsten welding electrode on the blocks, and the current it drew was so low that it didn't even trigger my scope. The peak was probably a few thousand amps or so. At this point, I was ready to increase the current, so I started zapping some big bolts, with the first one being a 1/2 inch in diameter. I pulled a peak current of 54,000 amps there, which is higher than anything I pulled in the last video, but it's still far from what I wanted, so I moved on to 3/4 inch bolts.
Oh, my
There's
eyes.
some sort of oscillation in that
Should
shot.
probably put a flash warning on this video, honestly. The bright lights hurt my eyeballs a little bit. But that might just be a me problem and not a general person problem.
Which was picked up on my oscilloscope as well. The slow-mo showed some sort of bouncing around on the contact blocks, but it wasn't clear what was causing this. When I did another trial in daylight, I could see that the oscillation might be originating in the switch.
Wow. Look at that. I think we had a full burn through there.
In order to find the source of these oscillations, I zapped a bunch of copper cables of varying diameters as the loads. I suspected that the switch was to blame, so I pointed my slow-mo camera at the switch for the first trials. Going from 2-gauge cable all the way up to 4/0, I never saw issues with the switch. There were sparks from the initial turn-on, but the plate stayed closed.
Yo, crazy smoke ring, though.
Next, I repeated the trials of increasing cable sizes, but with the slow-mo camera pointed at the blocks this time. What I found was super surprising. It sounded like the cables were exploding, but most of them weren't even burning through. They were being magnetically ripped out of the clamps. This force came as a surprise to me, since I chose a wiring arrangement that cancels out lateral magnetic forces on the loads.
The lights breaking the camera. I don't know if you guys see the glitch out, like right here in this little spot, like right here. But that's crazy. That's how bright it is.
Whatever mysterious upward force remained turned out to be incredibly strong. When I made it to 4/0 cable, which as a reminder is the biggest American wire gauge size, this effect was quite dramatic. It was violently bent upwards and managed to suck in all of the ferromagnetic materials nearby. It too did not actually burn through and instead was ejected from the blocks. In this shot, I measured a peak of 76 amps. The real-time view of
Did
this
you see that shit like spread out and like shred at the end though when it broke away from the clamp?
shot showcases some of the pros and cons of the low-voltage arrangement of the bank. It cannot shock me, which is nice. However, it also means it can't strike an arc across more than the tiniest of gaps, which leads to situations where the load is teetering off the block, ready to go off again at any moment. I have multiple ways to safely deal with these scenarios, but the science machete is my favorite.
The fucking what now, though? What now? Did he say science machete?
Oh, heck.
Brother, do not touch it. Do not touch it. What the heck?
Not enough?
My ass is so clenched for this guy. I would never, my dude. I would never.
Yeah. Yep, it's blown through. Yeah, fine. I should point out that my arc flash suit is more than adequate against these little sparks, and the magnetics make it impossible for me to fully short the bank this way.
Now that it's daylight, you can see that the 76 kiloamp shot just completely...
Holy fuck, is it just melted to the thing? Is he just melted to the thing?
completely welded that cable to the plate there. It's just... Well, okay, it came off. But it was...
I want to see the bottom. Show me the bottom. I can't see the bottom. It's like, deep fried.
Yeah, that was really, really stuck on there.
Oh, yeah. That shit's crispy as hell.
At this point, it was clear that the block mounts were an issue, but that didn't mean that the switch wasn't an issue as well. So I decided to sidestep the block issue by C-clamping the copper cable loads. Now I need to bring up why I've been using spring clamps instead of C-clamps. If you watched the last video, you saw that when I zapped bolts, I had a lot of trouble holding them on the blocks. The fact that I was using spring clamps to hold them down, and not C-clamps, infuriated a lot of viewers. So many people commented about this. Many of them...
Oh, that's just a wall. That's just a wall of angry comments. Speaking of a chat, I'm gonna give me 1 second. I'm gonna shrink down the chat box that's in my corner just a smidge. I'm also gonna shrink down the fishy game. Just a smidge, just for this video. That should be good. Okay, anyway, we resume.
For not using C-clamps, vices, or some other threaded mechanism. It's my fault for not explaining this the first time. And I get it, C-clamps are so much stronger, right? Well, the fact of the matter is that you cannot use C-clamps to hold a round, rigid object on the blocks. C-clamping a bolt onto the blocks will always lead to the bolt being ejected before it melts. It does not matter how hard you tighten them, this will happen every single time.
Wouldn't the that metal screw part of the C-clamp also eventually get like supercharged and also start melting though? Wouldn't that also be an issue?
Reasons for this. For one, the outer surface has an oxide layer, which means that the contact regions have lower conductivity and thus heat faster than the bulk metal. Plus, in the case of round objects, the current has to pass through a small area as it jumps from the blocks, which also dramatically increases the heating near the contact points. To make matters worse, hot metal is more resistive than cold metal, meaning more energy is dumped into the hot air.
I don't like that he keeps using the science machete. The science machete on live electrified things. Brother, don't do that.
Leading to thermal runaway. All of this results in the contacts quickly exploding off, shrinking the contacts to the point where they're no longer held by the clamps. Spring clamps, however, follow through with the shrinking load, holding contact with the block until the load finally melts. Of course, this is unless the magnetic forces are stronger than the clamps. That being said, C-clamps are still useful with flat objects, or loads that can be spread flat like stranded cable. The reason is that this moves the part of the load that melts to outside the grip of the clamps. Thus, for these next trials, I C-clamp stranded cable to the blocks, in order to see how the switch would behave with a well-secured load. The first test with zero-gauge cable gave an interesting result. It looked and sounded like a perfect shot.
It sounded like a straight gunshot.
Something to note is how fast the sparks shoot out from
Yeah, straight up, dude, straight up. That shit went fast as fuck, boy.
the exploding cable. The slow-mo shows that the cable did indeed burn through, and judging by the spacing between the blocks, The cable end was thrown back at a speed of at least 190 miles per hour. However, the scope shows that this was actually a bad shot, since it was split into two pulses of about 76,000 amps. Since the load was well secured, this implies that the switch bounced. Zapping two zero-gauge cables in parallel gave unmistakable proof that the switch was indeed bouncing.
Yo, that was a crazy amount of sparks from the
As violent
switch.
as this looks in real time, the slow-mo is far scarier. The switch managed to launch a toroidal plasma vortex into mid-air before blowing open. Honestly, I think I'm better off not knowing what kind of temperatures are involved to allow an ionized copper plasma ring to exist in air. Regardless, it's obvious that the plates are getting completely blown apart here.
Do you think this dude just has like constant bloody noses, or he probably is wearing a mask? This shit, breathing in this shit at point blank period cannot be good.
Which is most likely a magnetic issue. For the sake of data, I zapped even thicker cables, and the switch plates continued to get blown apart. The C-clamp struggled to hold down the cable in a couple trials as well. The scope showed that I was reaching peak currents of nearly 90,000 amps, and although this is triple the current of a typical lightning strike, it's still far less than what I had hoped for.
A typical lightning strike is wild. Wild.
Clearly, I need to find a way to keep the switch closed. The fact that there are opposing currents on opposite sides of the switch means that there are tremendous magnetic forces that push the plates apart. Some napkin math implies that these forces are on the order of a ton or more. This is on top of whatever explosive forces exist from the superheated plasma that forms in the switch. How can I combat this? The first idea that came to mind was to slap some huge springs on there because at some point a brute force tactic like
Springs will probably melt. Won't lie, probably melt. It's less than he hoped for is crazy.
that has gotta work. But something about that just didn't feel right though. And then it hit me. I shouldn't be fighting the magnetic forces. No, I should be working with them. I realized that the switch plates would attract each other if I could manage to get like currents going along both plates. The easiest way to do this, at least using what I had built already, seemed to be by rearranging the switch cables from an X-shaped configuration to a Z-shaped one. That way, there would be a component of current going along the length of the plates, which would magnetically bring them together. After thinking about potential issues of this arrangement for a while, I decided to just try it out and see what happens. Rewiring the switch took me 4 entire days, since I had to
God damn, 4 days to fucking rewire the switch is crazy.
every contact point that I had exposed. An unfortunate reality of this project is that any changes to the circuit are very time-consuming. The initial tests with smaller loads like steel rods and aluminum bar were promising, so after these,
God damn, I don't know what he put in there. That might have been the aluminum bar. I don't know what he put in there, but that shit looked like a firework gone off on the ground.
I went back to zapping 4-aught cable. The first cable behaved in a strange way. Both
Straight up exploded. Just gone.
C-clamps were completely ripped off the blocks, and the cable basically exploded without melting. I clocked a peak of 94,000 amps, which was only a slight improvement from before. I used 4 C-clamps for the next shot, but the cable was still ripped out of the clamps before fully melting. The third shot finally gave a complete burn-through. However,
What's he trying to achieve? Mad science. Dude wants to bring multiple Frankensteins back to life at once.
the switch was still bouncing. It sounded much more violent than before, and the pulses were spaced closer together, but the current hadn't gone up by that much. I hadn't even hit 100,000 amps. When I did more testing the next day, I struggled to hold the cables on the blocks, and made these silly oscillators as a result. The mysterious magnetic ejection force had become much stronger after rewiring the switch. After adding more C-clamps, I eventually got to the point where I could melt a cable again. The slow-mo of the switch showed more toroidal plasma vortices and even angrier explosions. What was blowing open the switch now? The answer finally made itself clear. Okay, so you can see the melt.
So fun fact, Shrimp, I believe the FBI has contacted this man. from what I've learned from my YouTube comments.
Wire there, which is interesting, but the real interesting thing is this. So here's the blown up, switch plates, and can you see that hole there? So it's on both sides. I've basically made a Z-pinch here.
I got goosebumps when I first saw those craters, because I realized I had encountered a phenomenon of
What the fuck? What the fuck?
astronomical proportions. The switch was triggering a magnetic implosion via a Z-pinch. This is such an extreme phenomenon that it makes every project I've worked on up to this point seem like a joke by comparison. A Z-pinch is the effect where a current conducting plasma is crushed inward by its own magnetic field. Some less extreme examples of the Z-pinch occur in lightning and electric arcs, and it's what holds the plasma in a thin filament. My best guess for the sequence of events in the switch goes like this. When the plates first come together, the high points explode off and ignite a plasma, perhaps causing an initial bounce. The huge magnetic field then causes the plasma to implode into a thin filament. This leads to millions of watts of power being dumped into a tiny volume, yielding temperatures beyond my comprehension. A Z-pinch is balanced when the magnetic pressure inward is equal to the hot plasma pressure outward. At 100,000 amps, these pressures are so extreme that they can nearly induce DT nuclear fusion. The thing is, though, a Z-pinch does not form a stable plasma. I can only speculate which mechanism destabilizes the plasma in my switch, but whatever it is, it goes off like a bomb. I figured I had to either vent the plasma gases or disrupt their formation early in order to get the switch to close. The first thing that came to mind was to add some copper cable to the plates.
That copper cable just melted instantly.
This didn't exactly work and managed to spray liquid copper everywhere, but I felt like I was
Yeah, I kind of assume so. From what I've learned from this man's channel is high voltage equals melted metals.
onto something. I added much thicker copper cables along the switch plate for the next test.
Yikes.
What the
Heck.
It was so violent.
Whatever happened there was significant. The bolts
Everything shook, dude. Everything got shook.
copper blocks were ripped through the wooden mount, and the cable was magnetically crushed into a smaller diameter.
I have to go take a look at the current. I think we had another 94 kiloamp shot there. Kind of odd how flat top it is. You know, that's interesting. I might be getting far higher currents than I expected. Because the fuse current equation, that is very much in line with a 150 kiloamp shot. Interesting.
At this point, I realized the numbers were not checking out. Now I should bring up how I'm measuring current here. In the first video, I just looked at the voltage drop across the cables, which isn't very accurate and only gives meaningful results when the current hits a steady state. For this video, I bought the biggest Hall effect sensor I could find that listed a price, which is this one rated for 20,000 amps. I've been feeding the cables from one of the 8 subbanks through it, and then multiplying the value by 8 to get total current. However, this seems to be measuring far too low.
Yeah, I was about to say, for as much shit as he's been fucking up in this cable alone, it doesn't look like that's accurate.
Based on how fast this cable melted. I had previously made this spreadsheet to predict how fast cables would explode at a given current, and it's based on the Onderdonk fuse equation. It predicts that 150
Man, he's bringing actual factual math into this, and I'm a little too dense to understand, I think.
50,000 amps are necessary to pop a 4-aught cable in 70 milliseconds. I suspected that the sensor was saturating, so I removed 4 of the 5 cables going through it, and then added a factor of 5 to the scope readings. I struggled to get a nice clean pulse in the subsequent shots, but I eventually achieved one good enough to confirm that this fixed the sensor issue, and I was indeed achieving far higher currents.
That was 138,000 amps.
138,000 is crazy. What are you trying to do, dude? What is the point?
I am just in.
Is it because we can? Is that the entire point?
Oh. And it can go higher. There's more. 138,000 amps. This is big progress. Big progress. Wow. I need to go eat and just the obsession, man. What a project this has been.
I kept adding more cables to the plates, but I never got another clean shot this way. So, for the next configuration, I stuck one of the original switch plates in between the new ones. I was hoping it would weld itself on there at a slight angle to vent the plasma.
So, the C-clamps actually failed on that shot, but I did pull about 110,000 amps, and the plate, somewhat welded on there. It's funny how, poor of a weld will still conduct really well, and that's just because the contact points will melt, and then there's very, very little contact resistance when that happens.
It's crazy how fucked up that perfectly clean, pristine plate, how fucked up that got in, one shot. He just put that on there, and it's already messed up.
So yeah, let's blow up another cable.
This wasn't working, but I suspected that if I allowed the zaps to go on longer, it might just finally close. So, I stuck 2 4-aught cables on the blocks, which quadruples the amount of energy dumped in the shot compared to a single cable. This led to the most violent display of electromagnetism I've
Ready to watch this shit, chat? Well, let's watch it go.
ever seen in my life.
Did you guys see it rain down molten molten cable? Did you see that? Did you see that?
Liquid copper was shot above the treetop level here. I measured a peak current of 140,000 amps, which gives a total circuit power of 9 megawatts.
Yeah, look how that wire piece got blasted back there while it was still borderline molten, and it just wrapped around that handle there. It's incredible. Actually exploded on both sides. Over here we got copper just painting everything. Even the ground is now copper plated. Just all the boiling copper getting sprayed everywhere. It's unbelievable.
I like that he's been doing some of these tests for so long and that the copper has spread so thin that some of it is oxidizing, so he's got splatters of green copper everywhere too.
I was about to attempt a new switch configuration, but then I realized that was actually really awesome. Maybe I should try jamming some weird metals inside the switch itself, at least before I attempt to fix the real problem here. So in this one, I'm going to try to weld this copper plate onto the big plate here, and I also have a piece of steel in there. So hopefully it makes a lot of
But why? Why is the point?
sparks.
The current didn't get particularly crazy here, but it still made a very nice shower of sparks.
Yo, that looked insane. That was so pretty. So pretty.
There's not much left of that steel plate there. It's really welded on there. Yeah, that plate is a little hotter than I realized.
How hot did it fucking get? Does he? I really would have appreciated a temp measure.
Yep, quite toasty.
I stuck a puck of zinc in the switch for the next shot. Unfortunately, it was ejected from the switch nearly immediately. Other than the initial explosion, the sparks here are just from the copper switch plates hitting each other.
I'm thinking that maybe aluminum would
Why though?
the solution here. Let's try putting this in the switch. Holy! What the?
What launched, brother? Brother, what launched? What hit the house?
What just happened?
I'm so glad he got multiple angles of that, because that sounded like something exploded or a gunshot went off or something.
What on earth just happened? That was so violent. Wow. That was bonkers. That was so violent. The copper cables were completely launched. Oh, interesting. It ejected, how did the ink end up out here? What?
We figured out what launched. The zinc threw itself off the cliff.
I have no idea how that happened. You know, that iron bar there got pulled off the ground magnetically. I'm just trying to notice all the details on what actually happened here, but that's ridiculous that the ingot was ejected.
I had placed a bunch of bolts on this little table before that shot, in order to see how they would be affected by the magnetic field.
Gone.
Aluminum works well for illuminating slow-mo shots since it burns so brightly in air. As you can see, the bolts were quickly sucked in by the magnetic field around the cables. It's funny because I've lost a lot of tools this way, and that I've left them too close to the cables before firing the bank. A detail I'd like to point out is how the steel post and winch redirect some of the magnetic fields, and that's why a few bolts get trapped in their vicinity. The aluminum was violent enough that I did a few more trials with it. In this one, a smoke ring was shot out sideways from the smoke plume. I have no idea how that's even possible.
Where is it? Oh, did you see it? Chat, it went this way. Hold on.
In this one, a smoke ring was shot out sideways from the smoke plume.
Yeah,
I have no idea how that's even possible.
it goes this way. That's crazy.
In this shot, it's the sound that stuck out to me the most.
Ooh, it's so crispy sounding. It's so crispy.
I've noticed that so many of the sounds I've heard from this project are unlike anything I've ever heard before. These batteries are capable of some truly unique audio effects.
So this is that aluminum block that didn't quite all the way melt inside the switch contacts. It got close, but not all the way. So I'm going to put it on the yeet blocks this time.
I love that every time this thing goes off and whatever is throwing sparks out of it, it just sounds like it's fucking raining. It sounds like it started raining.
Even though I had yet to solve the switch issue, I realized that the peak currents I was achieving might be enough to pull off the most important demo of this video, and that's magnetically crushing a pipe. So why is crushing a pipe the most important demo?
Renka Araki, thank you for the follow. Welcome in. How are you doing? Hello, small weed panda. Hello, weed panda coming soon. Promise.
Well, I tried this in the last video and failed miserably.
Well, coming eventually. We'll get there when we get there.
Even when I let the pipes melt from the current, they were still not crushed by the Z-pinch effect. At the end of the experiments, I said this.
Since the pressure on the pipe is proportional to the square of the current going through it, that means I'm not even getting close to what's needed at 40 kiloamps. Now, if I had a few hundred more car batteries, well then yeah, I could pull it off. But for what that would cost, I'd rather build a more accurate lightning machine.
Well, he got his few hundred more car batteries. He got his few hundred more car batteries. I wonder how it's gonna react. You got 2 new pets? Hell yeah, 2 little mice. I named them Oreo and Thin Mint. That's cute.
I bring this up because this car battery series was not my idea. I was actually hired to make these videos by the company AnyDesk. And no, they don't make car batteries. I'll tell you more about them in a bit.
He got hired? He got hired to do this video? What do you mean?
So what I'm getting at is that these maniacs bought me 300 more car batteries and another half ton of copper.
We've determined, fuck it, we ball, and we'll proceed with more car batteries. Let me know how you want to proceed, if it makes sense to set up a call. What do you mean he got hired to do this video? That's crazy. Both, actually, I think not just this one. That's crazy. That's crazy.
Just to see me crush a pipe. So yeah, this one's pretty important. I want to quickly add that if you have ideas for ridiculous experiments that you'd like me or another YouTuber to try, submit them at anydesk.com/science. It only hit me when I set up for the first pipe crush that this might be more difficult than I expected. Although these batteries are capable of pipe crushing currents, the circuit is slow to turn on. The combination of a bad switch, low circuit voltage, and cable inductance means that the pipe might melt before the current reaches crushing levels. A few attempts with various fuses did not manage to crush the pipe. Next, I decided to stick the unfused pipe on the contacts to see if it would at least crush while melting.
Dude, he's. I want to see him successfully crush this pipe now. My snake wouldn't eat Thin Mint, so I got emotional. Aw. I'm glad you kept it. I only cried for like 15. I'm also a sucker for baby animals.
Oh,
New jumpsuit, chat. New jumpsuit. It looks good.
it blew off both sides. Oh, that's crazy. I don't even know where it went.
I did see something over here.
It's crushed. It's crushed. There it is. It was crushed. Look at that.
Yo, it crushed and it flung itself like 30 feet away. That's crazy.
Of course, it was brought to the melting point. So in some way, it was kind of cheating. But still, this is like, I could not do this with a 100 car battery. So I'm really happy to see this. It actually crushed the pipe. That's amazing. I'll have to take a look at the current. Just want a better shot of that waveform. It's really only like 90,000 at the peak. But, hey, it did it. It did it. So I actually managed to find the pipe that I tried, directly melting and crushing with my 100 car batteries. And you can see how it didn't crush at all. So it's really cool to see that's what the increased current does. So
Yo, that's a crazy comparison. The 100 car battery pipe versus the 400 car battery pipe. Insanity.
On both sides, but clearly the 400 car batteries really made the more dramatic crush there.
I still wanted to crush a pipe without it melting though, which meant I had to go back to using fuses. When I tried zapping an annealed pipe, I lucked out with a perfect shot of the switch. However, it did not crush the pipe. I clearly needed more time for the current to rise, but using any bigger of a fuse would melt the pipe first. That is, unless maybe I could try water cooling it. I found this aquarium in the woods years ago, and since I haven't put any fish
The fuck you mean you found this aquarium in the woods? Who's leaving aquariums in the woods?
in it by now, I figured I might as well use it for this experiment.
I really hope that this works because I don't know what I'm gonna do if it doesn't. I mean, I put a lot of stock into the idea that I was gonna easily crush a pipe with these batteries. But yeah, it turned out to be harder than I expected. So yeah, I'm really crossing my fingers that this one works. So I'm gonna use this giant flashlight here at full power to illuminate this, so my slow motion camera can see it. And I'm gonna need a lot of light. Okay, here we go.
Something about running that much electrical current through water it gives me like a sinking feeling. Gives me like a sinking feeling in my tummy. I won't lie. That scares me.
Okay, so explodes, then I hit the button. Here we go. Okay.
Did it just melt and leave like a puddle of molten pipe on the bottom? Molten copper?
The slow-mo shows that the magnetic forces broke the aquarium right off the get-go. Then the pipe started to crush, but then it exploded. Clearly, everything is happening way too fast here for the water to do anything.
Yo, that's crazy. That's a crazy shot.
The ends of the pipe were crushed when it exploded, but this isn't much different from what happened with the unfused pipe in open air. Notably, the switch performed horribly in that shot, and this was a good reminder that I should go back to solving that glaring issue. Zapping smaller loads showed that the switch wouldn't bounce until the current rose to around 100,000 amps or so. Maybe all I need are some huge springs to hold the plates closed beyond that. This seemed worth trying, but I was too impatient and zapped a few more items before making modifications to the switch. I was particularly excited to pop these magnesium anode rods.
Here we go.
Why are we throwing things at me? Why are we throwing things at me? Thank you for the head pets. I love head pets. Yo, it sounds like a freaking machine gun, dude. That's a scary sounding machine, dude. What?
It blew up my fuses!
It, as you can see, it, blew up all those fuses, and the magnesium won.
That C-clamp is so hot, it's orange. That's how much electricity he just put through there.
I see that they all melted at the, at the lugs there. It wasn't the wire that melted. It could be that the fuse current of those lugs is lower than the actual quadruple-aught cable.
When upgrading the cable fuses, I noticed that 2 of them had been untorqued from the magnetic forces, allowing some corrosion to get between the contacts. With bigger fuses and clean contacts, I was able to achieve even higher peak currents. I got a particularly impressive number when zapping this zinc plate.
Why does this dude just have so many bars, plates, and ingots of random metals? Where do you acquire these things?
Due to fresh fuses and hot weather improving the battery performance, I achieved a peak current of 176,000 amps with this shot.
Now, something I wanted to point out is, so I tossed this makeshift just little wooden cover over this actuator that pulls out the pin that fires the switch. And as you can see, it's taken quite a beating. It's just coated in copper there. Now, the funny thing is that I had these copper wires that held it in place, and those melted before the wood gave way. Wood is like a surprisingly resilient material against plasma blast. It's the same way with lasers too. So it's funny how the wood outlasted the copper there.
At this point, I realized I had to quit procrastinating, and decided to go ahead with welding some big springs to the switch.
What the fuck? Was that thunder?
Well, I will say one
Is that a thunderstorm rolled in? Fuck, dude. I would not want this shit to get rained on.
These batteries, they don't scare me. What does scare me are these springs here. I have to load them up with the ATV winch. So, yeah, these are less predictable. I don't know what these want to do. Like, welds could rip off, bolts could snap, who knows. These batteries, I feel like I have a good idea of what they're capable of.
Oh, dude. Oh, dude. Dude, don't walk on them. Dude, do not walk on them.
Okay, I've got these springs mounted on here. That way the internal spring, as well as these new springs, make a nice little triangle there. And I'm going to finally test it to see how it works. I really hope this keeps the switch closed. Scopes ready? Alright, here we go.
No, your video
Oh, I thought my video froze. I was like, hello?
player didn't lock up. I just wanted to take this moment to admire the incredible light output of these copper plasmas.
Yeah, that's an insane, like, rainbow, like, light fucking... I don't even know what it's called. But it looks crazy.
Anyway...
I can't tell what happened. It seemed oscillatory, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, the switch was still bouncing. The new springs added so much tension that it maxed out the 1,600-pound hand winch I used to load them up, and yet they barely hindered the bouncing in the switch. Shorting one car battery may be easy, but shorting 400 takes a feat of engineering. I initially discounted the idea of using solid-state switching, but out of desperation I revisited the idea. Much to my surprise, I found that big SCRs were more than capable of switching the batteries. However, I couldn't find a single distributor that had big ones in stock, so I had to resort to brute force tactics. I bought another log splitter.
Yo, I think he's just in it for love of the game. Honestly, he's just there. He's just there for it.
I should point out that I've been using the hydraulic part of the log splitter to open the switch, not close it. The idea is that the tough hydraulics can rip apart the plates when they weld, and it's functioned perfectly for this purpose. However, its big internal spring I've been using to close the switch is clearly not enough. Adding a second log splitter makes the closing action hydraulic as well, but it comes at the cost of moving much slower than the spring. In addition, I added some rails and reinforced the entire structure with a bunch of steel posts. The reasoning is that the slow-mo shots had shown the plate sliding sideways from magnetic forces, so I wanted to lock everything to one axis to prevent that. I had a little mishap when I tested the return springs I added.
Ow!
Whoop.
Shoot. That was what I was worried about.
Did he snap the spring? Is that what happened?
Oh, it just straight up sheared off the hook.
Bye, Renka. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
See, that's what I mean when I say springs are actually scary. It's electricity doesn't scare me. Springs scare me.
I ended up just foregoing the return spring since the internal one seemed adequate. Alright, for the first test with the two log splitters here, I'm going to zap 2 more of those quadruple aught cables just because they have a very predictable fusing properties. So yeah, I really, really hope that this works.
Alright, here we go.
Dude, everything shook. In that overhead shot, everything shook.
That was good. That was very good. I liked that.
The scope showed that the switch bounced at first, but it did eventually completely close when 160,000 amps were passing through it. The slow-mo confirms this as well, as the switch quits making sparks before the cables explode. The drop in current at the end was from the cables getting magnetically ripped from the blocks. Further testing gave the same results. The switch would initially bounce, but it would still close afterwards. I had to concede that this was gonna have to do. I needed to continue on to the main experiments before autumn temperatures got too cold and put too much of a hinder on the current I could pull from my battery.
Dude, he just said it like 20 minutes ago. It was finally warm outside. He went through the entire year doing this. Holy.
It took me months, but now I finally reached the point where I can hold sustained currents of over 150,000 amps. You're about to see what this kind of current can do to small objects, but I still think it's worth giving you a sense of scale and just how incredible this number really is. So, how big is 150,000 amps? Well, this is fusion reactor levels of current, and this is enough to ignite DT nuclear fusion.
Nuclear fusion? What the fuck are you doing, bro?
In a Z-pinch fuser. This level of current exceeds the entirety of the auroral Birkeland currents that surround the planet on a typical day.
What the fuck are you doing, brother?
Also far exceeds even the top 1% of lightning strikes. And in fact, the charge transfer during a single shot from these batteries is more comparable to an entire thunderstorm's worth of lightning bolts. Now, I get to screw around with these baffling levels of current. A 1-inch bolt was the finale of my 100 battery video, so I'm curious to see if it's much different with 400 batteries.
Oh no. That just sprayed fucking liquid metal everywhere, dude.
Wow, that was a lot of sparks.
I think he needs to build himself a slightly bigger box for this. Like, just a little bit bigger.
That was really cool. Wow.
So in the previous video, I made a crowbar circuit. So of course, I want to try it with the 400 car batteries this time. Now, as a review, a crowbar circuit is a real thing. It just usually doesn't mean using a literal crowbar for it. It just means to have something short the power supply rails to protect the rest of the circuit. So yeah, let's see how long this thing will hold up to the car batteries.
Alright, and here we go. Whoa! Whoa! Everything's on fire! Oh, that's
Dude just lit up his entire setup. It's gone.
beautiful. Dude, that's insane. Look at all that hot metal. Look at all that hot metal. It's like burning the dirt. Look at that. All that just incredible. It blew it up into a bunch of
I also like the progression throughout the series through this video, by the way. I don't know if you guys can remember from like the very beginning of the video. There was very sparse grass throughout here. I love that he's charted to an absolute crisp and the grass is just gone.
That's really crazy. It didn't do that last time.
My friend James brought over his dad's old wrench to see it zapped by the car batteries.
Where's the leak, ma'am?
Do not, bro, do not.
Whoa, what?
The fucking wrench is on fire, bro. It's just burning.
Wow.
That is insane.
Wait, that broke in like...
Yeah, it broke in a bunch of spots.
Just like what happened to the crowbar, the magnetic forces on the wrench broke it up into several pieces when it melted through. I still hadn't figured out where this upward force was coming from, but when I zapped brass bars, I had an epiphany. The big bar suffered the same fate as many of the cables I had blown up, in that it was magnetically ejected before it could burn through. It still made an impressive display.
I don't like that he's just hiding behind this tree to do this. I think he just should stay in his little box that he built.
It was the small bar that gave me the revelation.
It got lost, didn't it?
The bar melted on both ends and was ejected perfectly upwards, being sent into a fast spin as it was launched. The bar solidified into this bent shape, which I figured approximated the equilibrium state of forces on the bar when it's on the blocks. I've already mentioned that the forces from the opposing loops of cable cancel out, which meant that the upward force must have been coming from the fields of the nearby path of current feeding the loads. I realized that an object off the axis of the main current would be exposed to much stronger fields than an object in line with the current. The fact that the current had to make the small bend off the blocks was the origin of this super strong force. The funny thing—
I love that the blocks, by the way, progressively get more and more messed up. How did he afford all that? Somebody paid him to do this.
kilogram ingot of bismuth, I was able to jam it in the middle.
I am once again asking how this dude just has all these random bars of stuff. Why do you have a kilogram of bismuth?
Well enough to minimize these forces.
Ooh. Oh, the yellow smoke looks like it smells like piss, dude.
This was one of the most impressive burn-throughs I achieved with the batteries, and there was very little left of the bar afterwards. The slow-mo shows that much of the metal likely boiled off.
Ooh.
These incredible plasma fireballs, as the metal vapor—
Dude, this looks crazy. This looks crazy in slow motion.
with the oxygen in the air. The yellow color of the smoke is due to the bismuth trioxide that was formed in the reaction. I zapped a big block of zinc, and although it wasn't particularly noteworthy, it did lead to something funny.
So look at this ridiculous thing. So these blocks were sitting on the ground and got magnetically sucked in there. Then they shorted and welded themselves together.
Zinc gives far more beautiful effects when it's plated onto steel, like on this galvanized pipe here. It's funny because I zapped all sorts of weird and exotic metals for this video, and humble old zinc stole the show from all but a few of them. Zinc's fairly high reactivity, paired with its unusually low boiling point, gives unique effects.
Yo, this is so pretty. It's so pretty. For why, though?
Like any other metal I've zapped, other than maybe bismuth. The fact that zinc burns green at a modest light level is what really takes the cake when it comes to slow-mo filming, though. I zapped a couple titanium bars, and although they were cool, they were so bright that I failed to get good slow-mo footage of them. The most notable effect from this trial was that the two bars magnetically attracted each other and welded themselves together. I zapped some pieces of zirconium, which is among the hottest and brightest burning metals.
Ooh.
That was so bright!
Much like titanium, zirconium was so bright that it too was challenging to capture on camera. It feels weird for me to complain about something being too bright, but the enormous contrast in light levels is difficult to squeeze within the dynamic range of even a nice camera. I substantially dialed back the exposure on the slow-mo shots.
Yo, the slow-mo shots are so good. I'm so happy he includes those because they're so fucking clean every time.
Compared to most other medals, and they still ended up on the overexposed side. Now that being said, I love how well the little popping piece
look how crazy, look at this crazy shot. It looks so cool.
of burning zirconium show up in these scenes. I revisited titanium in the form of little chunks to make another attempt at slow-mo. I cranked back the exposure, but it still wasn't as much as I should have. Now that being said, it still showcased similar popping sparks to what I got with the zirconium. As a bonus, this shot made a perfect smoke ring as well.
Crazy.
I was curious how this configuration would work with a bunch of Abe's.
He's gonna just throw pennies at himself. He's gonna throw burning hot pennies at himself.
Pennies.
I'm pouring one out for the U.S. penny. Ha! This one I see I shot with a laser at some point. Funny.
Oh.
So there's one really big spike there. Like about 140,000 amps for a short bit. So that's wow, that was actually more than I expected, but of course it was very brief. That's hilarious.
I was surprised how violently the pennies were ejected from the
Yo.
like this. But then again, weirder things have happened at 140,000 amps. Yet
The fucking fireball, the smoke ball, I should say, not a fireball. The smoke cloud is insane.
again, zinc showed
Like, looks like a tiny mushroom cloud.
its beautiful pyrotechnic colors in this shot, which were likely complemented by the copper shells that surround the zinc cores. The thick and delicious zinc oxide smoke seems to make filming the burning metal so much easier, as the smoke diffuses the light and limits such stark contrast in light levels. I tried the same configuration with a bunch of bolts and nuts to see if ferromagnetic effects would change anything.
Ooh.
Wow, look how much different that was. So they didn't even get ejected. They all just stayed there for the most part. I guess they were magnetically sucked in there. That's really interesting. Wow. Yeah, look at that. Just one giant mass that all melted together. Now that is an abstract art piece there. Beautiful.
I revisited aluminum and had a few notable shots. In one trial, it made a really cool sounding oscillator.
Oh.
The lens
It's something. Oh, he cracked the camera lens. Oh. Oh no.
on my tree camera was hit in another shot as well.
Or maybe that's not a crack. It was a really cool sound. That's what I was originally going to comment on. Maybe that's just molten metal. Hopefully he didn't crack the camera lens.
Aluminum burned so brightly in air, I wondered, would it burn in the same way if I zapped some underwater? When I tried crushing a copper pipe underwater, it ended up just exploding, but it made for really cool high-speed footage. I found another aquarium in the woods to attempt this setup with aluminum cable.
Oh wow, a secondary a woods aquarium. How handy.
Alright, so camera, flashlight, yeet, camera, flashlight. Okay, getting ready.
Okay. I think when he's playing with glass, glass, he really needs to go to his little explosion shelter.
Glass went absolutely everywhere on that shot. I mean, everywhere. Water went everywhere. My cameras are soaked. That was ridiculous. That thing blew up so violently. Okay, I really hope that was good. Whoa! Oh my goodness. Oh, that was a cool shot. Wow. That was beautiful. Okay.
He really channeled his inner Owen Wilson with that one. Wow.
That's what I wanted.
Only the Lord decides how the switch will perform in a given shot, and this was its slowest turn on of the entire video. Now, this gradual ramp up of the current actually made for some interesting slow motion effects.
Oh, look at the water like starting to boil around the wire. So that's where the the lids went stop.
Once the aluminum was heated well beyond the boiling point of water,
Oh,
the Leidenfrost effect became apparent through these neat oscillating bubbles. The switch managed to close about a millisecond before the cable melted, pushing the current to around 70,000 amps as it exploded. You can actually see the aluminum melt here, and notice how it gets magnetically crushed inwards the moment before it explodes. This explosion was so much more violent than the copper pipe that I suspect that chemical effects played a role. The reaction of aluminum and water is extremely energetic, exceeding even thermite by mass. However, this reaction is incredibly difficult to initiate, but I figure a 70,000 amp plasma would do it. I wanted a better shot of the explosion itself, so I obtained another aquarium and crimped another aluminum cable.
y'all, he's got all of your guys' aquariums now. You guys gotta stop leaving those in the woods for him to find.
I used a smaller lug that better fit the cable in order to push the explosion to the center.
All right, here we go.
Jesus.
Okay, that sounded good.
Unfortunately, the copper lugs exploded before the aluminum here. I managed to push 100,000 amps through this one. The
Jesus.
explosion was less violent than the previous shot, which implies the shot earlier was indeed chemically enhanced. I substantially dialed back the exposure on the slow-mo compared to the last shot, and even though it was the copper that exploded here, the details of the
The
plastic
explosion still looked really cool, though. The explosion still looks sick. Hello, Willie.
bubble are much more apparent this time.
Oh. It tickles my brain.
The last element on my list to zap is tungsten, which is the metal with the highest melting point. This 1/4-inch thick rod may not seem like much, but this is tungsten after all, so there's a sizable mass here.
Seems like nothing.
I can't believe... Why are my hands out? I can't believe you just punted me into the explosion. How could you do that? I don't know why my hands are out. That was timed perfectly. That was timed perfectly. Good job.
Did it just burn through instantly? What?
Alright, this is really strange here, so
What melted? Was it the clamp? Look at the fucking clear path it left. Tungsten's a bitch to work with. I see
It
that.
actually just burned and melted the steel around that. There was steel holding it down and it just melted right through that. I think the tungsten did burn a bit, but yeah, it just melted everything else around it. I guess I shouldn't be so surprised, but that's pretty funny. Well, I smacked it to unweld it, and it just broke it. Of course, tungsten is pretty brittle, so I'm gonna have to get a bigger piece of tungsten here to zap. Alright, I've got this long tungsten rod here. So it's a 1/4 inch in diameter. And the thing is, I know that electrically, this isn't a big challenge for these batteries here. This is really more of a materials challenge. Alright, so the idea here is that I've added some copper under the this tungsten rod here. And then I'm going to use these graphite blocks to hold it down with the clamps. So yeah, hopefully this works.
That's a crazy setup, and I hope that graphite burns pretty.
I'm starting to worry that I'm not going to be able to pull this off. But this should at least make a lot of sparks. So let's try this. Alright, here we go.
Ooh. Is that the graphite exploding, maybe? Ah.
Oh yeah, it completely detonated. Oh yes, it completely detonated in there. Wow! Completely obliterated it. So let's see what the remnants look like here.
No, the tungsten actually exploded through the middle. That's actually crazy.
True melting happened so fast that it definitely wasn't burning. It actually straight up melted the tungsten.
The slow-mo of this shot is one of my favorites from the entire video. The white-hot rod gets magnetically shattered into pieces as it melts, sending a shower of burning
Yo! Again, I'm gonna reiterate. I'm so happy he included like the slow-mo shots because this looks insane. Like this just looks like straight up fireworks, man.
in a scene that resembles something from the Hubble Space Telescope.
Alright, so you can clearly see that definitely melted
dog
there.
shit
So,
content.
I mean,
Please
and it
subscribe.
happened so fast that this couldn't possibly just be from burning. You can see how it liquefied there. I might try zapping these pieces in parallel to see, maybe get a better slow-mo shot.
What ignited?
Holy
Heck. I dialed back the exposure a bit compared to the first shot, and yet, this one ended up even more overexposed than the first. I really should have expected this with twice the metal though.
Not only did it melt, it was like, splashed upwards there. Man, I wish tungsten wasn't so expensive, because I'd love to throw just a huge chunk on here.
I ended up
Yeah, he ended up getting a huge chunk of tungsten. Look at that.
splurging on this half-inch thick rod of tungsten. Once again, this may not look like that much, but it weighs nearly
Oh, it's a squirrel. Look how cute it is. Look how cute the squirrel is. Look how cute. I love him.
a gram. To put that in perspective, this thing weighs more than a typical fox squirrel, which is North America's largest species of tree squirrel. The thing is, though, melting this rod in air felt like it wouldn't even be a challenge. Of course the batteries could do it. I wanted to melt this rod underwater. This meant I had to come up with some clever mounts. Even though copper melts at a far lower temperature than tungsten, I figured that with enough contact area and a big enough current, the tungsten would still melt even if the full contact area of the copper melted first. The only issue with a full liquid metal conduction interface is that nothing would stop magnetic forces from blasting the copper plates outwards. So, I loosely bolted the plates to a block of phenolic. That way, as the copper melts, the magnetic forces will twist the plates in a way that exposes the tungsten to more solid copper. I couldn't find any more aquariums in the woods, so I had to start buying them at Walmart.
The setup of this took so
Guys, you got all of your aquariums, I'm sorry to say.
long. I will be very disappointed if this does not work.
Alright. Oh man, I'm nervous. Okay. Alright, here we go.
That tank is obliterated. Is that the sound of it burning? Is that the sound of it just burning?
What happened? I don't even know what happened. Oh, it's totally gone. What happened here? I didn't hear like this big explosion, but I just heard like this boiling. The scope makes it look like it melted instantly. I don't see the tungsten rod. I don't know what happened to it, and it clearly exploded. So, yeah, we'll find out once this is done saving. That's really strange.
There's a lot to unravel in this footage, so I'm going to start
Yeah, it exploded though. So it exploded, so there shouldn't have been any water in the tank. So what the fuck was making that boiling sound? He missed one, hit it too well. Good job.
with the real-time views.
Oh, okay, no, it melted and it was in the water as it drained. Okay.
Let's start with the obvious. The tungsten was blown to pieces as well as the aquarium. However, did you notice that crazy blue smoke? The submerged piece of white-hot tungsten reacted with water to make this ridiculous mixed suboxide.
Oh,
I had no idea tungsten
I didn't realize it was smoking blue. That's crazy. It looks so pretty.
could make a blue compound like this. When the water drained and this piece was exposed to air, it then burned with the typical yellowish smoke associated with this trioxide. Another important detail is that the cables feeding the aquarium Z-pinched so violently that they nearly uncrimped themselves. Now for the slow-mo. The current in this shot quickly rose to 100,000 amps,
Look at the water instantly start boiling around the tungsten too.
producing tremendous magnetic forces on the cable loop feeding the rod, and it was these forces that shattered the aquarium. It took a full 1/10 of a second for the tungsten to melt after the aquarium first broke, and since the view is so obscured by water at this point, I can't say for sure whether it actually melted underwater. Chances are better than not that some part of it was exposed to air though.
Yeah, the Lorentz forces were too strong, it looks like. It's so hard to avoid those huge forces just because the cable has to bend when it goes in there. You know, if I had time to redo this again, I would replace 2 of the edges on the aquarium so I could, with like, on a wood or something. That way I could pass the cable straight through it. That would save a lot of the forces. But I guess for now I'm gonna have to call it quits.
At this point, I decided to revisit the magnetic pipe crushing experiments. Even though I had already managed a hot pipe crush earlier, I wanted a better slow-mo shot of that happening, so I repeated the trial with another unfused pipe.
What happened to his little shelter? Why is he hiding behind this tree now?
However, it failed to crush. The new switch was way too slow to crush even a melting half-inch pipe. With the switch before this, the current would quickly ramp up to 100,000 amps, even if it bounced afterwards. While this new switch can actually close, it can take a full 1/10 of a second to reach full current. That's way too slow. I moved up to bigger sized pipes for the next trials. I didn't have any cable that would conveniently crimp to this size of pipe, so I just smashed the pipe ends flat with a hammer. The idea with the bigger pipe is that it would allow the current to rise to a higher value before the pipe melts, although it comes at the cost of requiring even higher current to achieve a given magnetic pressure. Unfortunately, even this did not lead to the pipe crushing. Then one day I had some friends over and I stuck a pipe on the contacts, just with the intention of making a loud bang for them. The switch decided to turn on quickly for once.
What was the second one?
So usually because the switch is slow, so you heard the switch go and but something was magnetically ejected. I don't know
Yeah.
what. Something got thrown.
That was good.
Woo! Yeah, look at that. Completely, totally crushed.
The
Crazy.
pipe was crushed so violently that it
Holy fucking hell, dude. It's like twisted around itself. Look at that. Look at that turn, bro.
twice. It's too bad I didn't set up external lighting for the slow-mo camera, since I would have liked to have seen more detail here. The magnetic field managed to suck in some nearby steel plates and toss them into the yard. This sent me on a wild goose chase of catching this effect in better lighting. Naturally, the effect turned out to be super difficult to repeat, as the switch returned to misbehaving and turning on too slowly. I was determined to get this to show up on camera though, and blew up more pipes than I'd like to admit in pursuit. The switch wasn't
Rough estimate, chat. How many pipes do we think this man blew up?
always the failure mode in every shot though. Sometimes the C-clamps would give way, and other times, steel objects nearby would get sucked in magnetically and photobomb the shot. Crushing the pipe flat did turn out to be somewhat repeatable, and if I hadn't seen the cool double fold earlier, I would have been quite content with this. However, I figured that with enough trials, the odds would be in my favor for the double fold to happen again. After countless trials, I finally got the lucky shot I was waiting for.
Okay, I'm sorry, Ghost. I will refund you those points, but I'm gonna turn the scam dog costume off for the purpose of for this video. It's a little big and it blocks most of the screen. Sorry. I'm also still a rat. Chat, how long have you guys let me be a rat for?
In hindsight, I think the trick was placing the pipe on the edge of the blocks, as this intersects a stronger external magnetic field than zigzagging the pipe through the middle. This adds additional lateral forces along the full length of the pipe that help initiate folding. I didn't stop there though. I still wanted to crush a pipe without melting it, and came up with an elaborate plan to do so. For starters, I suspected I could bypass the log splitter switch by using an SCR to slam on the circuit. Of course, I didn't expect the SCR to survive this, but if it worked for a single shot, that would be good enough. I also upgraded the pipe from the hardware store variety to oxygen-free high-conductivity copper. The reason being is that at liquid nitrogen temperatures, it's 10 times more conductive than copper at room temperature. This allows for significantly more time for the current to rise before the pipe melts.
Now, I close the main switch. That is not touching. Okay. Now, I hit this. Go.
I find it super satisfying when shit just explodes, just like ignites.
No, I missed it on my camera!
Heck.
No!
The smoke cloud is insane, by the way. The smoke cloud is crazy.
Ah!
I had been struggling with my slow-mo camera getting EMP'd, so I removed the trigger cable prior to this. I forgot that this
That's a totally valid reaction, by the way. He tried so hard to get that shot. I'd also probably flop on the ground like that.
on the camera, and pressing the record button didn't actually start the recording.
Okay, so, man, it's too bad I don't have data from this shot. But it did pinch a little bit. But I think the most intriguing part is that it uncrimped itself.
What was sizzling at the bottom of that when he moved it? What?
So this cable probably got, crushed, and then it pulled itself out there, so it pulled out the crimp. That's pretty wild, because I really crushed it down with a hydraulic crimp. So there was some pinching, and there's a little bit of crushing, but man, I just wish I had the data from that shot. That's a real shame.
I decided to give this setup another try with a much more aggressively crimped pipe.
I'm going to hit the camera to detonate it, right? Okay. Okay, what happened? Didn't even see any of this. Let's go look at the slow-mo.
I did actually manage to capture slow-mo of this one. It's interesting how the SCR in this shot exploded, even though the one prior to this did not. Of course, the first one was still destroyed though.
Well, looks like it's the SCR that failed there. So, yeah, didn't quite work. That fuse is still totally intact. It had a peak of a little under 100,000 amps, but yeah, I couldn't make it any higher than that. I wonder how much of that was the SCR's fault versus other heating in the circuit. But yeah, disappointing.
At this point, I had to admit defeat with the cold pipe crush, because there are still so many more experiments left to do. The cold pipe crush could probably be done with a pulse-forming inductor though, or maybe just another 400 car batteries. I want to do a brief section on zapping auto parts, since this was a popular request for me. An ignition coil
Oh, I was like, what car part is that? And then he immediately explained it. Never mind.
seemed like a good place to start. In the past, I've abused ignition coils to pull off some cool high voltage tricks.
What the fuck is happening there? What the fuck?
With the batteries though, the internal coil melted too fast for anything interesting to happen. I figured that a starter motor would be more durable than the ignition coil, since it's designed to draw a significant amount of current in operation. Something tells me it isn't quite rated for the full 400 car batteries though.
Alright, here we go. That was lame.
Slow-mo shows that the motor did start to spin, but it still only managed to survive for mere milliseconds before burning up.
Now I'm just gonna try shorting it through the case. I feel like this should make more sparks this way at least.
Oh.
Ah yes, much better. I have this long dead car battery here that measures 0 volts and will not take a charge.
So you gonna put the car battery through it? Isn't that dangerous?
I'm curious what will happen by zapping it with the batteries.
You know, I feel like containing this one wouldn't be such a bad idea.
Why? It's in a microwave. Oh, he removed the thing. I can't remember what it's called, but he removed the dangerous components.
I'll play it safe with this microwave casing. Here we go.
And he's wearing a gas mask. Good job. Good job. Nothing?
Oh, jeez.
Are you scared? What's happening? Hello, Ronan. But what's happening?
This was one of my most surprising experiments. It looked as if nothing happened, but instead of exploding, this battery was actually revived somewhat. It seems the plates were desulfated.
I mean, that's not too surprising. That's not too surprising, I guess.
Because the battery can now take and hold a charge. That's wild.
You know, jumper cables work pretty well with 1 car battery, so of course I wonder how well they'll work with 400. I wonder if they'll melt first or if they'll magnetically rip apart. So I guess there's just one way to find out. Oh hey, I was not expecting this.
Oh, you're gonna be a problem because I can't blow things up if you're here. Are you gonna interfere with my,
Oh, it's a squirrel. Yeah, you can't blow shit up around the squirrel, man. You gotta let him go.
car batteries?
My squirrel friend Ophelia decided to visit, so I had to wait to test out the jumper cables. She's used to all the explosions at this point, but I figured I'd let her chew on these antlers in peace before blowing anything up.
She's so cute. Oh, I love squirrels, chat. I love squirrels so much. Kill it. No, I love squirrels. They're so cute.
After a subsequent splooting session, she ran off and I was able to continue with the jumper cable test.
So here's the jig for the jumper cables. So I'm just going to, I just have them short of there, just see what happens there. So we'll see what breaks off first.
Here we go.
What happened?
The switch is closed.
Oh, well, there's the culprit. It melted through the, I guess where it was crimped to the clamp
Fucking just completely obliterated, dude.
there. Well, if these clamps are just gonna melt off, I at least want to see what the actual cable does. So now I just have the bare cable against the blocks.
Did you guys see that cable deflate though? Like all the air got sucked out of it.
Alright, so this is kind of sus. Get that in focus. Look how, look, it's silver colored. Is this like copper plated aluminum or something? The box said it was pure copper. So that's not pure copper. I don't like that. I think this is just garbage,
Dude got ripped off.
garbage jumper cable.
I ended up making some much nicer jumper cables using 4/0 copper cable.
Alright, this is what I have for
That's me when your mom is crazy.
the new jumper cable setup. So, have them actually bolted together there, but you can see how that is glued together there. So that's really what I wanted to show.
Alright, am I ready?
Yes.
Yo, big explosion.
Oh yeah, they got obliterated. They got obliterated.
Yeah, they just flew right apart. Like they didn't even stand a chance, man. They just flew apart.
This was exactly what I was hoping to see. The huge currents traveling in opposite directions through the cables caused tremendous magnetic forces that ripped them apart. I couldn't get this to happen with the garbage cables I zapped earlier because they melted before passing enough current. The final auto part to zap is the suspension spring here, and I did this one with an audience.
Ooh.
Are you guys ready?
Yep.
Alright. Here we go.
His little safety hut's not big enough for all those people. Oh.
Whoa.
Yo, that spring's turned red hot.
This suspension spring ended up as one of my favorite shots of the whole project, and for such an ironic reason too. The long length of steel acted as a resistor and substantially limited the current, starting at only 8,000 amps and dropping to less than 1,000 by the time it melted through. It's usually all or nothing with these batteries. Either the items are obliterated in milliseconds, or nothing interesting happens. It was cool to see something that fell in the middle ground between these two categories. Later
The fire in that slow-mo shot looked crazy. It looked so cool.
on, I zapped a length of chain that gave a similar middle ground result. In this case, the chain reached a steady state where it got red hot but never melted through. Other than this chain and the suspension spring though, everything else I zapped either instantly exploded or had no visible reaction.
Whoa!
What the fuck?
For the next experiments, I've hooked the output of the car batteries up to this metal stick here, mainly because I want to try cutting stuff with it. Now, I did some experiments like this in the last
Why? Why are you doing that? What is the point? Why are you doing that?
video, but with this one, I'm most interested in testing different electrode materials, because I can already tell you that this steel electrode here is not going to last long. So yeah, let's get to experimenting. Now, I'm going to have to step up the PPE for this section. In particular, I have this arc flash hood. Now, this was actually given to me by Greg Lay. And if you don't know who he is, he recently had a lot of notoriety for his Lorentz cannon video that he posted. Now, I actually find it hilarious that this is the video that got him so much notoriety, because that's really like a tame project for him. He's currently building the biggest Tesla coils ever operated right now to do some just ridiculous lightning experiments. So yeah, that guy is the man when it comes to electricity. So if you don't know who he is,
Because he can is such a crazy flex, though. You're so right.
you should definitely check him out. And yes, a big thank you to him for giving me this arc flash hood.
I'm gonna keep this section short because between my respirator and arc flash hood, it sounded like I was speaking through a wet sock on my microphone. I would like to take a moment to appreciate the spark
Hold on. Oh.
iron makes. Not only here, but throughout this whole project. Iron sparks aren't nearly as bright as many other metals, but this fairly subtle effect pairs nicely with the extreme powers I have available. Plus, when it comes to filming these effects, it's much easier to capture something like iron sparking compared to a bright metal like magnesium. Honestly, iron is an underappreciated element overall.
You know, I think of those memes where it says this is why women live longer than men. Yeah. Well, that was fun.
I can't believe he just obliterated that casing of that microwave just for freaking lulz. I miss Zuzu. I miss Jacob.
Now, I want you to notice those curved paths there. I felt this, force off to the side when I was trying to cut there. I think that was being magnetically deflected. It was really strong too. All right, now I've upgraded to a magnesium electrode this time. Now, magnesium doesn't have a very high melting point, but it is surprisingly conductive, and most importantly, it's very pyrotechnic. So I'm curious to see what happens when I try cutting iron with this magnesium electrode here. Oh dear.
Right off the bat, it was clear that magnesium was an entirely different animal. Since magnesium burns so readily and
Is this Styropyro? It is Styropyro. I love Styropyro.
energetically in air, these chemical effects greatly enhanced the heat produced in the arc. It didn't take long to ignite a good portion of my yard on fire with these scenes. The most dramatic difference compared to
Jesus
iron
Lord.
part it
My brother, why? Just why?
was to hold the magnesium electrode. It was extremely difficult to make more than a brief contact, since the electrode would get forcefully ejected from the object I was zapping. The magnesium was obviously drawing more current here.
Now, one interesting thing I do want to note is that the magnesium here didn't get that warm. So even though, it just produced just incredible temperatures there, what happened here, because it's so conductive, it really didn't get that hot. It wasn't on fire, so I dumped some water on it, and it even sizzle. Now this is the one I'm most excited for. It's a big rod of titanium. Now titanium has
How the fuck? That's a fat fucking rod of titanium. Where did you get that from?
it's more resistive than the magnesium is, which honestly is probably going to be a good thing, but also has a very high melting point, and more importantly, it's still very pyrotechnic. So yeah, I'm going to hook it up to that stick over there and try it out.
Jesus. Okay, I don't know why that sound effect specifically made me jump. so fucking fascinating.
I would say that titanium was my favorite of the 3 metals I tested. It was far easier to hold the titanium electrode compared to the magnesium one, likely due to its much lower conductivity.
He's just spewing molten metal everywhere. It's all over the yard.
Limiting the current. Even with the lower current, I'd bet that the average power was still higher, simply because I could actually hold the electrode in place and get a faster train of pulses compared to what I could with magnesium. Titanium's high melting point also meant that this electrode lasted much longer than the others.
Look at that titanium rod.
Jesus.
I realized
Red fucking hot, dude.
it was getting so hot. Yeah, it's clearly more resistive there, but I can't believe that. But wow, that one is
Yeah, you can grill meat on that thing. You can grill your meat on that thing.
fun. That is very fun. There's an old saying that says that anything will act as a fuse if you put enough current through it. I feel like most of the experiments in this video fall under that. However, I do want to try popping some actual legit fuses with these batteries.
In most other scenarios, a 500 amp fuse would seem pretty huge, but in this context, it's pretty tiny. What happens when I zap it with the batteries?
Alright, here we go.
Yeah, dude's got a crazy laugh. He's like diabolical. He's diabolical as fuck. I love him for it.
If you thought that was boring, well, it's designed to be boring. A fuse is supposed to break the circuit in the least exciting way possible. I cut open the fuse to see what's inside. As you can see, it's filled with sand, which prevents it from getting spicy when it blows. Some
Oh.
of the sand actually melted to the fuse element there. Here I have a 1000.
I wonder if he can get something hot. I wonder if he can get hot enough to melt glass. That's what I want to know.
fuse, and I'm actually going to cut it open first. That way we can at least see some sparks when it pops. This fuse looks to have parallel elements inside. I hope this one is more exciting than the last one.
That one sounded like a firecracker.
Nothing to write home about, but that vivid green flash was pretty neat.
I can see the burn through there was a lot more complete compared to the last one. That's probably just because I got rid of all the sand inside.
I refilled the fuse with indium metal to see if anything cooler would happen when it zapped.
That's more along the lines of what I expected. I'm not even gonna lie. That big explosion.
Probably should have done the math on that one because the indium didn't melt at all, so I think there's just way too much cross-sectional area of
I think the copper wire actually blew.
indium. But look, that the magnetic forces actually bent those tabs there. Those are thick tabs, so that was that's pretty silly.
The slow-mo shows that the
Ooh.
extreme currents may have magnetically ejected the fuse before the indium could melt. Regardless, I doubled up the cable feeding the fuse for the next shot to play it safe.
Jesus. That's also more along the lines of what I was expecting from the fuse.
Alright, there we go. Yeah, I don't think there is a drop of indium left in that fuse. That just completely exploded. That's really, really funny. Oh, and there's a bolt there that I did not put that there. That just, of course, got magnetically sucked in, as everything does. And let's go take a look at the current. 120, 130.
It still makes me wildly uncomfortable that he likes to just walk across these fucking live batteries like that.
Amps. Not bad.
The slow-mo on this one turned out awesome, even though the clamps barely held up for the shot. Most of the indium was ejected as it liquefied, mainly via magnetic forces at first, and then when the fuse finally popped, it made an impressive explosion.
Alright, now it's time for the real inspiration of this section. Some years back, the electricity legend photonic induction popped a 5,000 amp fuse. As far as I know, this is still the biggest fuse that's been popped on video. Well, I'm going to try popping a 6,000 amp fuse. This monster weighs something like 45 pounds, and it's the biggest fuse that I could find online. Now, it's not often
I didn't even realize they made fuses that big. Jesus Lord Almighty, dude.
I can beat photonic induction at anything, so I felt like this was a good use of my batteries.
This monster has silver-plated copper contacts and has an impressive 200,000 amp interruption rating. That's one heck of a fuse.
Now, of course, being a 6,000 amp fuse means that it's meant to conduct 6,000 amps without popping. So something like this car battery here, I mean, it could short this car battery all day and it's not gonna pop. I mean, it's gonna kill the car battery first. So this is where the 400 car batteries come in.
So how much current does it take to pop this thing? Well, that depends on the duration of the impulse.
My 6,000 amp fuse is the top line on this curve here.
Yo, you guys cannot complain about my shiny ass head if you guys are the ones who took away my wig. Okay?
So based on this, at 10,000 amps, the fuse will last about 17 minutes before popping. If you go up to 20,000 amps, it'll last about a little less than a minute. But of course, I'm most interested in this end of the curve. At 100,000 amps, it'll only last 10 milliseconds. Now, of course, the actual peak current that this gets to before it pops is going to depend on how my switch wants to behave. But regardless, this shouldn't be very hard for my batteries.
In the interest of making more sparks, I opened it up and emptied out all the sand inside. This does change its fusing characteristics, but I would argue that due to the nature of the continuous extreme DC currents I'll be feeding it, the fuse will now take an even higher impulse before breaking the circuit. The reason being is that without
Holy
the
fuck.
sand, it's going to make some angry plasma.
That's a crazy looking fuse.
That's hilarious. It's just a bunch of smaller fuses in parallel. It's like that all the way down, isn't it? Fuselets all the way down. I'm not even gonna bother cleaning the contacts here because it'll melt straight through all that, char and stuff on there. All right, there it is. All the cameras going. Here we go. Let's pop it. Let's see. All right. I think I'm ready for this. I think I'm ready. Let me get my slow-mo camera set up here. All the cameras good? Think so?
I really hope this just goes boom, dude. I really want to see it go boom.
All right. Here we go.
Oh, that was satisfying. That was satisfying as fuck. Oh, yes.
Jeez. I think I popped it. Wow. I can't wait to see what it pulled in the scope there. Oh yeah, big pulse there. Oh, what happened?
Okay, I saw this video. This video is crazy. It's so satisfying to watch.
What? It's not dead. No way. It melted the contact block. It didn't blow up the fuse. That's crazy. What?
It didn't blow the fuse.
What?
That's crazy. That's crazy. I thought it blew the fuse. The contact block was what fucking blew.
Look at that. It melted the block first. And it ripped up that C-clamp. That's insane. I'll just have to resituate that, because yeah, the fuse is completely intact. Wow. I was so confident that was going to work in one shot, too. It's crazy.
Sure enough, the close-ups show that the fuse itself was completely untouched by this. The sparks were simply from the contacts below burning up, and causing the C-clamps to give way as a result. If you wonder why I didn't bolt the fuse to the blocks, it's because the blocks are too uneven from previous experiments, meaning bolts would lead to the same results as the C-clamps. This isn't something I can buff out. A suitable clamp, however, will allow the high points to melt, giving a conduction path with very low resistance.
Okay, so I've changed this side to spring clamps, that way it can follow through.
This one clamp is so fucking burnt the hell and back. He abused the fuck out of everything the surrounding. Look at the C-clamps! I didn't realize how many of these things he just fucking charred to a crisp.
Variations burn out there. So yeah, let's give that another go. Dude, I can't believe that this is taking me 2 tries. This is silly. All right, here we go.
Please let that have been the fuse. I really hope that was the fuse and not something else. And yes, that is Bunny Boy in chat. Hello, Arthur.
Okay, yes, that one finally popped it. Thank goodness.
There we go. I'm surprised how clean of a burn through that was.
Jesus Lord. Jesus Lord. I'm an aardvark. Yeah, just like I'm a quote, a rat, unquote. What the fuck? How long have I been a rat, chat?
Just completely vaporized those pieces in there. Kind of surprised, just considering the voltage I'm dealing with is low. But that definitely did it. That was a full pop. The switch had a few hiccups there, but once it finally closed, the fuse pulled 150,000 amps. So that is why that was so violent there. Nice.
The slow-mo shows that the fuse made an incredibly
Ooh.
violent plasma jet when it burned through. Impressive.
One thing I have to mention is that when photonic induction popped his fuse, he used a capacitor bank that gave a short but intense impulse. Now he claims a peak current of 200,000 amps. Now even though he doesn't provide waveforms, he likely
That would imply a time you weren't a rat, because I'm not a rat. I'm a fucking panda. A panda!
achieved at least that number. Now, when I set out to make this video, I really thought I was going to show you the highest current on YouTube, but that's because I didn't consider his video. And I popped a bigger fuse than him, but as far as the highest peak current on YouTube, he still has me beat. I will say this though, his capacitor bank is very impressive. And although I don't have a capacitor bank like he does, I do actually have a more energetic pulsed electrical device.
No, I'm not talking about the batteries. I'm talking about the cables feeding the batteries, specifically in their inductance. When the bank
No, I am not a rat VTuber. I will never forgive Average for starting those allegations. I will fist fight him immediately after stream.
There's actually more energy stored in the magnetic field around the cables than photonic induction's capacitor bank at full charge. This inductive energy plays a role in the explosions I get when objects burn through.
Jesus.
Now, even though I popped this fuse, I still have one experiment in mind left for it.
How many more experiments do you have? Brother's just been blowing shit up this whole video. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love it.
I want to see how it acts when filled with metallic sodium. Interestingly, when I was considering sacrificial fuses for the pipe crushing experiments, sodium metal stuck out to me as a promising material, since it has a very high
It's
conductivity
making me scared with that very, very real science machete.
along with a low melting point.
Yeah, just sort of smash it all in the middle like that. Maybe I can shove it back in.
There was a lot of leftover sodium from that shot, so I smashed it up against the contact.
The dude just using a giant stick to poke it back down is so funny.
In order to give it another zap.
Alrighty, here we go.
Ooh. I won't lie. The explosions make my little the explosions make my little frog brain happy. It's giving Screwdriver and the Demon Core. Yeah, that scared me too when I watched that.
Honestly, these shots were kind of
Oh.
mid. I think sodium's high conductivity
No, I don't think those shots are mid. I think those are still good shots. I still like the way it looks. Those are very pleasing.
hard to heat up with the batteries. Spraying everything down with a hose afterwards showed that little droplets of sodium had been splattered everywhere, which I thought was pretty funny.
Now it's time for my favorite experiments of this whole project, the magnetic experiments. As you've seen countless times by now, the currents I can pull from my batteries produce incredibly strong magnetic fields. Now, these fields were a nightmare when I was trying to build my switch, but now that I have that somewhat solved, now I can actually have fun with the magnetic field.
A typical electromagnet involves a coil of wire wrapped around an iron core. At the currents I'm dealing with, though, an iron core will just saturate,
Oh.
which means I'm better off not using anything as a core material.
Now the problem is that making even a bare coil is an engineering challenge at these currents. It takes an enormous amount of metal to not melt just instantly. And that's on top of how magnetic forces will try to shred any coil arrangement.
I just saw a car being driven by a sheep in a swimsuit. It was a lamb bikini.
Lamborghini's so funny. Stop it. Hello, Jax.
As an example, I wound this coil here with stiff aluminum cable. Its resistance is high enough that it will only pass around 50,000 amps or so. Even at these limited currents, the coil windings are strongly attracted to each other and cause the coil to scrunch up. At 150,000
Ooh.
amps, these forces would be far stronger. I spent a lot of time considering how I was going to make suitable coils without spending a fortune on metal. But after witnessing how anything becomes a magnetic black hole at these currents, I realized that even straight pieces of copper would be more
Jacob, why we do that? Why we do that? Why we do that? Why we do that? Don't do that. Don't do that.
than adequate for these experiments.
It was a good joke, Jacob. It was a good joke, Jacob.
Sure enough, by sticking a couple cables on the blocks and tossing a bunch of nuts and bolts around them, the magnetic effects are super obvious. Wow, look at that. Look at the explosion.
Ooh. That glows really fucking bright.
The switch performed horribly in this shot, but even so, the nuts and bolts were glued to the cable before the current had hit even a quarter of peak. When the cable finally melted through, it managed to catapult some of the bolts across the yard. Anyone that grew up with a CRT TV is probably aware of the fun that can be had when a magnet is brought near them. Their sensitivity to magnetic fields is the same effect as all the other magnetic forces in this video. It is yet another example of the Lorentz force acting on current.
I vaguely remember once upon a time in my life being at my grandparents' house when they still had a CRTV with like some weird like magnetic like paper doll thing. And I remember my brother going, hey. No, my brother, somebody was like, hey, Azura, you should go stick one of those on Grandma and Grandpa's TV. And I said, okay. And I did it and it fucked up the TV. Yeah, I remember that. Vaguely.
I was curious how much a CRT TV would be affected by the fields produced by this battery bank. The load for this shot is my standard pair of 4/0 copper cable. I really hope this doesn't kill the TV. All right, let's do this. And
I kind of hope it kills the TV. I won't lie.
here we go. That had an adverse effect on the electronics in this TV. The magnetic field was so intense that it just turned off. I didn't know that could happen.
Oh yeah, the CRT looks different after that. I know it temporarily killed it, but yeah, let's take a look.
Yeah, I think that was a bit excessive because the magnetic field was so strong it just completely deflected the beam off the screen. So, yeah, maybe I need to move it away. Yeah, that plasma shield did some work there. Ripped off one of the C-clamps, and then wrapped that cable back. A peak of 160,000 amps, so pretty intense. You know, I think it was a bit much to have the TV in the center there. I decided, I moved it out this time, and I also, I'm going to limit the currents by using this steel rod instead of copper. Because yeah, I think 160,000 amps was a bit much. Then also, now that the field is going to be, the magnetic field is going to be reversing directions here, so maybe it'll actually fix the TV by having it sit out here. So yeah.
Okay.
I think it'd be hysterical if he could fix the TV. I won't lie.
Go.
Yeah, that was much gentler that time. That was only about 55,000 amps. So yeah, that was pretty interesting. I'm glad I tried that. Now it looks as good as new.
The image on a CRT TV is produced by an electron beam, and it's this current that gets deflected by the magnetic field. This sort of magnetic
Dude, it's going sideways. It's so funny.
beam deflection is actually the basis of mass spectrometry, which is a standard analytical tool in chemistry. I made an important discovery when I zapped a Z-shaped cable. My intention was to physically simulate the forces and torque present on my Z-switch arrangement. The clamps ended up failing on this one, and it functioned as a magnetic catapult. If you look closely, cable fragments were ejected so quickly that it managed to do a little tree trimming out in the distance. The slow-mo shows a lot of cool details. A bunch of magnetic junk got sucked in like in every other shot, but in this one, a little magnetic particle managed to orbit the cable for a bit. The main takeaway from this shot, though, is that the cable is bent from its original arrangement and violently ejected upwards. I stuffed the cable back in the blocks, but this time I bent the cable so that it was below the center line of the currents feeding it. The switch struggled to close in this one, causing the cable to bounce around for a while at first, but the main result was clear. It was being violently slammed downwards this time. A bonus is that when the fuse in the center finally exploded, it ejected a neat ring of liquid copper. These shots gave me an epiphany regarding the mysterious forces that eject the cables from the blocks. I thought I had solved it earlier, and that the fields from the straight current through the blocks was causing this. But no, that's completely wrong. Those fields do exactly the opposite. They actually pulled inward via the Z-pinch effect. That means that this mysterious, tremendously strong outward force is actually beating the fierce Z-pinch forces that pull it inward. What's actually going on here is quite profound.
I've had to read a lot about fusion power for this project, because I'm dealing with fusion levels of current, and the people in this field have done a good job at documenting the just crazy things that happen at extreme currents. Now, sure enough, the same phenomenon that launches items in my setup is actually a huge issue in fusion reactors. So here's the basic idea for what's going on. So when
He's going to explain it, and I'm going to be so blunt with you guys, and I'm probably not going to understand very much of it.
current path is perfectly straight, that means that the magnetic forces that crush inwards are also perfectly balanced. However, this is an unstable equilibrium. If there's any sort of bend in this current path, then you get this buildup of magnetic field on the inside of the curve compared to the outside, which causes a net force pushing outwards. Now, of course, this makes the current path make an even bigger bend, which means you have an even bigger force pushing outwards, and you get this runaway force, and this effect is called the kink instability. Now, in my setup, the fact that the current...
What does CRT stand for? Fuck if I know, my guy. You tell me. What does CRT stand for? No, and I'm not an electrician.
...has to make this small bend off the blocks is actually the origin of this incredibly strong force that launches my items.
And just to clarify this insanity, simply making the current take a 1-inch jump off the center of the blocks produces forces so strong that it can rip up 4 8-inch C-clamps that have been wrenched down so hard that the handles are bent. That is the nature of extreme currents for you.
Now, I'm lucky in that my current path is through a solid conductor, which means I can just add more clamps or maybe pound the ends flat first to defeat this force. Now, when the conductor is a plasma like in fusion, this is much harder to deal with. In fact, it's instabilities like this that are one of the main obstacles to achieving fusion power.
In order to mitigate the kink instability, I started using leftover pipes from the crushing experiments as loads. By pounding the ends flat, I can mount them closer to the blocks than the 4-aught cable, and the rigidity helps prevent runaway forces compared to the flexible cable as well.
What's he pouring down there? Is that ferrite? Cathode ray tube? Yeah, no, I had no idea that's what CRT stood for.
For this shot, I sprinkled a bunch of magnetite under the pipe.
Oh. It was not ferrite. I don't know why I was thinking ferrite.
I was disappointed when I had to concede that I couldn't get a perfect turn-on with my switch. But in many of these experiments, the initial chaotic changes in current honestly make for cooler video. In this clip, an initial brief pulse launches some of the magnetite beyond the pipe, and this happens once again before the switch finally latches shut. If you look closely, you'll see that the magnetite...
Yo, it's so fucking cool that it stuck to the pipe.
...inward as opposed to traveling straight to the pipe. The coolest part of this clip is after the pipe explodes and the magnetite rains down here in this crazy pattern. I think what's happening here is that the magnetite was magnetized by the current.
Ooh.
And this residual magnetization causes the particles to clump up and stick together. I wanted a better slow-mo shot of bolts getting sucked into the magnetic black hole of all this current, so I repeated this experiment using a pipe fragment as the load.
Jesus. I still want to know why sometimes he uses his little hidey hole, his little hut, but other times he just stands behind that tree.
Woo! All right.
I only follow peeps under 5 feet. Thank you for the follow. Welcome in. I appreciate you. Remember, it takes nothing to be kind to others and kind to yourself. Oh, you're so kind.
Beautiful.
Bro is making electromagnetic pipe bombs. You're so right.
Unfortunately, both C-clamps failed to hold down the pipe in this one, causing a bunch of sparks to obscure the view. One of the C-clamps was completely destroyed here as well, since it briefly conducted some of the battery current. I used a longer pipe for the next shot. That way I could hold it down with 4 C-clamps instead of 2.
Jesus. It's raining fucking nuts and bolts. Look at it go.
This could be an epic one. Let's see how this one went. Oh, yeah. That was
Sorry, chat.
awesome. Cool. Yeah, it was awesome. That was a good shot. I couldn't tell where it went, but that's just because it got slapped backwards there. And all those bolts just went everywhere. Yeah, it looks like a peak of 160,000 amps on that shot. Switch had some issues, but hey, it did its job. Sorta.
This is one of my favorite shots of the entire video. The bolts were quickly sucked in by the current, and the oscillatory nature of the startup is once again apparent here. It's clear that it's not just the bolts getting pulled in by the field though. A spring clamp on the ground found its way to the pipe as well, and even way in the
Yeah, like all these little metal bits that are floating around are coming towards the pipe too. It's crazy.
background, you can see everything magnetic getting thrown around. The pipe eventually collapsed by the forces of the current it was carrying, and it made a hefty fireball when it finally melted through. I wanted to see if I could hit a weight limit for the lifting forces, so I placed about 10
Those are
pounds of big
that's some massive nuts, bro.
bolts all around the pipe for this shot.
That didn't sound good. I don't understand what happened. What? That's weird. They all got sucked in and glued to it? What? That doesn't make any sense. What? That's so weird. I've never had that happen.
This one was unusual in that the bolts didn't fall back down afterwards. They were stuck to the pipe.
No, this is really
Did they melt? Did they start melting maybe? Are they just that magnetized now?
weird. So, the pipe got pulled downwards, and these are all, like, glued to the pipe. They're all welded together.
The slow-mo shows that the nearby bolts were effortlessly sucked in by the magnetic field, and less than 1/10 of a second later, the bolts that were out of frame on the ground got sucked in as well. There was so much iron getting pulled in and accumulating on the pipe that it eventually spanned the entire gap between the blocks, which meant that it too began directly conducting some of the current. This current welded all of the bolts together and around the pipe, so this is why they didn't fall off afterwards. The biggest iron object I had that would fit between the blocks was this anvil. It weighs 10 kilos or 22 pounds.
Dude's gonna blow up a fucking anvil.
It's a hefty little piece of iron.
Alright, here we go.
Why does he just have a random anvil, by the way? Jesus. It just sprayed liquid metal straight up. It's like straight into the air, dude. You don't have one? Oh my god, chat. Who here who has an anvil?
It sounds like the anvil got zapped.
It never stops being crazy to me that the strongest electromagnet I've gotten to screw around with on video isn't a big coil of wire around an iron core or even a coil at all. It's merely a straight piece of copper that just so happens to pass an entire thunderstorm's worth of charge in a couple tenths of a second. Much like the big bolts before this, the anvil was pulled up against the copper blocks, causing it to pass some of the current as well.
I can't believe
The reason for
I can't believe his 400 car batteries Made an electromagnetic field so strong it picked up a 10-kilo anvil.
Sparks. I want to point out something surprising about the dirt on the blocks here. I know countless commenters are going to lecture me about dirty contacts increasing resistance and causing problems, but I found that the max current is completely unaffected by whether I clean these or not. Where contact resistance actually matters is in all the little cable connections throughout the bank. Those have to be spotless to get the currents I'm achieving. However, I found that anywhere the current density gets extreme, like the blocks or the switch, the contact interfaces actually melt, giving a purely metal conduction path that has extremely low resistance. If anything, the dirty blocks help the switch close faster because the current initially ramps up slowly. Pretty weird, right? I zapped a pipe near an array of compasses in order to visually map out the fields. Notice how they're pointing all
Yeah,
over
that's what I was
the
trying to
place
look.
start here. This is because of
That's
the pieces
crazy.
of iron nearby that have been magnetized from the previous experiments.
Jesus. Like half of those compasses immediately spun to change.
Jeez. Where'd it go? Where'd the pipe go? I have no idea where the pipe went.
Here it is. Oh, it got crumpled like crazy. Look at that.
Oh, damn.
Wow, it really folded in. That's
Dude, he fucked that pipe up. It's twisted. The seam doesn't even go all the way in the straight line.
impressive. That was one of my best crushes.
I nearly didn't include this compass bit in the video, because what the compasses show doesn't make any sense. In particular, the 4 compasses on the side of the block to the left read alternating values. And that's ridiculous. They should all be aligned with each other. I initially chalked this up to the compasses being cheap garbage and simply reading incorrectly. The pipe crush at the end was so good though, that I wanted to include this clip in the video. I decided to give the compasses the benefit of the doubt. I grabbed my box of new compasses and tested them with a magnet. Much to my surprise, they all tested perfectly. That's strange. I had kept the compasses used in the experiment separate since they were dirty, so I grabbed that box and tested them. Lo and behold, some of them read exactly the opposite of what they should. What gives? A compass works on the principle of a magnetized needle aligning itself with a magnetic field. It seems what happened here is that the magnetic field became so strong so suddenly that the compass needles that were initially aligned against the field didn't have enough time to reorient and were remagnetized in the opposite direction. That's pretty neat.
That's crazy, though. That's a crazy flex.
I had noticed that these pipes have been acting as decent catapults, so I wanted to try intentionally launching something this way. I glued a big steel nut to this GoPro here and notched the pipe to cause it to melt through in this location.
Yep.
Chat, you guys ready for go on a trip? We're gonna go on a trip, chat. Prepare yourselves, strap in.
We're good. All right, here we go. Where'd it go? Oh, it didn't get launched.
Aw, no trip for us.
Well, it did not get launched into orbit, it looks like. Sad. A little crispy, too.
The inertial forces were too strong, and the nut was immediately ripped off the GoPro. The nut was catapulted into oblivion, but the GoPro barely moved. I ended up bolting the nut to the GoPro in a very ironic way in order to give this another try.
All right, chat, now buckle in. We're gonna get ready for our trip, chat. Get ready for our trip. Whee! Off we go. Let's go.
It wasn't launched as far as I'd like, but I am impressed how well it held up to the magnetic fields. I've had major issues with my cameras getting EMP'd throughout this video, and that's even with them spaced much further away from the big currents. The time has come for the final experiments and my favorite shots of this project. I'm going to see what happens to ferrofluid next to a pipe carrying 160,000 amps. Ferrofluid is a neat way to visualize,
Oh, ferrofluid.
and it consists
Oh, I love ferrofluid, bro. I love it.
of magnetic particles suspended in a fluid. Most demos showcase it around permanent magnets, but of course, it works just as well around electromagnets too.
Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. My hands are stuck again. My hands are stuck again. How could you do this? How could you do this? I don't know why my hands are getting stuck.
Considering the strength of the fields I have available, I expect this one to be pretty cool.
Woo! Something exploded. Oh good, the pipe crushed. Alright, that was cool. Let's see what that looks like. Oh! Holy! That was an epic shot! Wow! Wow! Okay.
I didn't realize that the dark background wouldn't offer enough contrast against the ferrofluid to see it rise up, but at least the fluid wrapping around the pipe was super obvious. I want to point out the bit of ferrofluid that gets
Straight up, it's venom, bro. That's venom.
trapped around this little iron post, and that's due to the iron concentrating the fields in this area. As the pipe heated up, so did the ferrofluid around it, causing the oils to boil off and make a thick white fog. The pipe in this shot was crushed from the current, and when it finally melted through, the sparks ignited the oil vapor.
Jesus
and made a
Lord.
huge fireball. I decided to give this another try with a better background, using a piece of wood to offer some contrast against the ferrofluid.
Alright, here we go.
Oh my god. Explosion.
Woo! That was nice. See what that looked like.
Man. I have so many jokes I could tell, but none of them TOS friendly about the shape of this.
Wow, so completely stained that piece of wood black from the ferrofluid and then it just crumbled that pipe. Nice. I wonder what the current was on that. Oh, it was huge. Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, that was 160 at its peak. That was a really good shot. Well, for the new Switch configuration, holy
Heck. Sadly, I had bumped the camera lens out of focus for this one, which is such a shame because this shot was destined for greatness. This was my last bit of ferrofluid too, so I almost called it quits here and settled on the earlier shot. I realized that if there was one shot to do right, it was this one, so I ordered another bottle of ferrofluid to give it yet another go.
Alright, so I'm gonna go camera, light, yeet switch, and back to the camera. Okay, here we go.
Yeah. Yeet switch.
Jeez.
That's gonna look crazy in the slow-mo, by the way.
Wow. Whew. That is always so surprisingly loud. Yes, yes, that was finally it.
This was the shot right here, and I think it's the coolest thing I've ever filmed in my life. In the span of 1/10 of a second, nearly the entirety of the dish of ferrofluid was slammed up against the pipe, while the total circuit power rose to over 10 million watts. One detail that stands out to me is how the smaller bits of ferrofluid in midair are aligned with the field, and another is that many of the particles take a spiraled path inwards. Just like in the other attempts,
Jesus
the
Lord.
pipe implodes from the 160,000 amps that it passes, and once it melts through, it ignites the hot ferrofluid to make a huge fireball. I think it will be hard for me to ever top a shot like this. I've already mentioned that this video was not my idea. It was actually the company AnyDesk that reached out to me and wanted me to experiment with a bunch of car batteries.
Again, he got paid to do this. He got paid to do this experiment. They bought him the car batteries.
Of course, they bought me all the batteries as well as the supplies I needed to make this video possible.
Now, the fact that a video sponsor came up with the best idea for a video on my channel is still just astonishing to me. I know AnyDesk is going for the whole Red Bull of science kind of vibe, and they really hit it out of the park with this one, because this was a genius idea for so many reasons.
It's one thing to make an electrical video about something like capacitors or Tesla coils, and although these can be a lot of fun, these aren't things that most people can relate with. But car batteries? Everybody knows what those are, and everybody knows they are powerful. It goes far beyond the clickbait appeal though. These car batteries gave me currents rivaling what's seen in multi-billion-dollar facilities. They allowed me to poke the fundamental forces of the universe, and as a result, they allowed me to take footage unlike anything ever recorded before. You can thank AnyDesk for making all of this possible.
Thanks, AnyDesk.
So what even is AnyDesk? Well, AnyDesk gives you a lightning-fast connection to all your devices.
Whether it's your computer, your surveillance network, or even your favorite experimental apparatus, you can manage them from all around the world with low latency and on low bandwidth. With AnyDesk, you can offer tech support for loved ones from the comfort of your home, or help out work clients from wherever life takes you. AnyDesk is free for personal use, and offers business plans that are custom tailored to your IT and work from home needs.
AnyDesk is also in the business of supporting some of the coolest science projects on the internet.
If you have ideas for ridiculous science experiments that you'd like me or another YouTuber to try, submit them at anydesk.com/science. The ideas that are brought to reality will win cool prizes and lead to the creation of epic videos. So yeah, a big thank you to AnyDesk for making this project possible.
So at this point, I've ran out of time to continue the battery experiments. I mean, winter's clearly here, and the cold temperatures dramatically limit the kind of current I can pull from the batteries. That means that any further experiments
really hope this is all covered with a tarp a little bit better than what I see here.
we'll have to wait until next year when it warms back up again. So what will I do with the batteries until then? Well, they're just going to hibernate out here in the yard. Now I know this is surprising to most, but the rain and snow really aren't bad for them. I mean, the only critical detail for storing them in the cold is that they're kept fully charged. I mean, the first 100 have been sitting out here for 2 years now. Oh my gosh, the snow is blinding me. But those 2-year-old batteries still test almost new, just because I've always kept them fully charged. Now, if you're curious how I've been charging the batteries, I've just been using this 1500 watt power supply here. Now, if you think
Casually has a 1500 watt power supply, it's crazy.
it seems small, well, it is. It's just that, every experiment with these batteries takes a lot of prep. So in a typical day, I can really only do a few shots. And, that doesn't really discharge them by all that much. So, slowly charging them with this thing is more than adequate. Now, I will say that it feels like I've barely scratched the surface of what's possible with these batteries. It's just that I spent so much time working on the Switch that I didn't have time to get through all the experiments that I wanted to. So needless to say, there will be more videos with these batteries in the future. Now, as far as future experiments go, there's a lot I have in mind. I really wanted to melt tungsten underwater, as well as some other underwater experiments. So that's probably like the lowest hanging fruit of future experiments I can do. Now I know a lot of people want me to wire all these things in series here, but I really just can't think of that many things I'd do with that kind of arrangement. I mean, yeah, I could draw some just ridiculous arcs, but other than that, I really don't feel that it's worth the effort or risk, really. Now that being said, I did arrange all of these battery sub-banks in a way where I can fairly easily rewire this bank to 500 volts. And 500 volts at 20,000 amps, I think there's a lot of fun to be had there. There is a more interesting way to get higher voltage from the batteries though. If I were to stick a big coil in the circuit, that would allow me to get these big currents also at a high voltage. So the idea with
I don't think sticking a big coil on this is going to be a good idea.
Which you can then release in an instant in
I thought I paused. I don't think sticking a big coil on this is a good idea.
It's just enormous pulse. So if I wanted to build a railgun with these batteries, that's how I would power it. And even just for blowing things up, if you stick a big coil between the batteries and the load, it's going to make the explosions a lot more violent.
I'd like to give a special thank you to Greg Lay, Seth Miller, Bert Hickman, as well as all of the members of my Discord for the advice that they gave me throughout this project. I'd also like to thank all of my Patreon and channel members for all of the support. As always, these supporters get early viewing of my videos as well as sneak peeks on all of my projects.
So yeah, that's all I have for this video. Hope you enjoyed it, and be sure to stay tuned for even crazier experiments in the future. Thanks for watching.
That was a crazy video, chat. Thanks for sitting with me for 2 hours through that. That was an insane video. Holy fuck.